My name is Leroy de la History. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. And today we'll be discussing on what we left off on yesterday, which was the Emirate, the Caliphate of Cordoba. The Emirate itself was a successor of the Umayyad Caliphate, which was centered in Arabia. To get a quick rundown of what we'll be discussing today, Al-Andalus refers to the Muslim control over the Iberian Peninsula, and the Taifas refers to the states that emerged after the collapse of the Caliphate of Cordoba. So without further ado, let us get into the topic. As I said before in the intro, Al-Andalus is the name for the period of Muslim control over the Iberian Peninsula that began with the Umayyad Caliphate in 711, when a general known as Sadiq ibn Ziyad invaded the crumbling Visigothic kingdom. Following the collapse of the successor state, the Umayyad Caliphate, known as the Caliphate or Emirate of Cordoba, several new polities emerged. These were known as the Taifas, or kingships. Think of the petty kingdoms of England, Anglo-Saxon England, if you want an example. Surprisingly, however, the Christian kingdoms up north made uneasy alliances with the Taifas, who were known for their political infighting between each other. The period, however, also was known for its cultural flourishing between the two religions. Keep note that many Taifas were either absorbed into other Taifas or conquered by the Catholic monarchs on the peninsula, which would be a recurring theme. By the 11th century, however, the Taifas were being pushed against the wall. They initially had to pay tribute to the Christian kings, but the tributes began to falter since they were being sucked dry. It's to be noted, too, that the taxes that the Taifas were putting on their subjects were considered illegal in Islamic law. Some of these Taifas, however, were being conquered by the kingdoms of Castile, Aragon, and Leon. Even the most competent and powerful Taifa, Seville, didn't last long, ironically. So, desperate and unable to unite to defeat the Christians either out of spite or hatred for one another, they pleaded with the Almoravid dynasty, which were a Berber dynasty. They were from the Maghreb, and they had recently consolidated their power. Yusuf ibn Tasbin listened to the pleas of the Taifas and subsequently vassalized them, adding them to their empire and repelling the Christian advances and ultimately slowing down the Reconquista, which referred to the reconquest of the lands of the late Visigothic Empire from the Muslims on the Iberian Peninsula. Andalusian art, culture, and methods of governance influenced the Almoravids, and this marked the first time Al-Andalus and the Maghreb were politically united. Keep note, however, too, that the Caliphate of Cordoba had some territory in the Maghreb, though it was disconnected and didn't last long. The Almoravids lost Zaragoza, weakening them politically in Iberia. They also failed to stop the Reconquista fully, and to make matters worse, a revolt occurred. This revolt would also be the downfall of the Almoravids and caused the second Taifas period and the rise of the Almohad Caliphate, another Berber Muslim empire in the Maghreb. The Almohads, followers of Ibn Tumad, rallied and united and answered the call of help from the Taifas again, though this proved futile, as the Almohads did the same as the Almoravids, simply conquer and annex their lands into their own empire. It should be clear that the men, the soldiers, the kings who quote unquote helped the Taifas didn't really care about them. They only added their lands to their own empire because it was convenient. Though they held the Christians at bay for a while, they had their own things to attend to back in Morocco. They at least weren't as fanatical as the Almoravids. Almoravids followed a strict and harsh interpretation of Sunni Islam, which angered the Taifas, by the way. They soon, however, would be pushed back by the Christians and lose their hold over Iberia, having a simulation to the Caliphate of Cordoba, in which there was infighting and others proclaiming themselves caliphs. Soon, governors would be deposed, Christian attacks were even more harsher, and they conquered some lands, and in 1228, The departure of Al-Mamun, Almohad Caliph, marked the end of Berber control over Al-Andalus. By now, the remaining cities and states of Al-Andalus, one by one, fell to Christian attacks. They were unstoppable, it seemed. However, a member of the Muslim resided dynasty, Muhammad I, seized control of the southern Al-Andalus, his capital located in the city of Granada, hence forming the Kingdom or Emirate of Granada. It would be the last remnant of Al-Andalus. How unfortunate. Once one of the most powerful and culturally diverse kingdoms in Western Europe, to a shell of its former self. They would never regain their full power then. However, they left their mark on the region with yet another cultural and economic source. Though they were a tributary of the Crown of Castile, making sure that they didn't declare war with them, they also frequently fought them in border conflicts. It became a refugee for former Muslim elites and dynasts living on Iberia. Granada would reach its peak and golden age under Muhammad V, who contributed to one of the remaining structures of Al-Andalus, the Alhambra fortress, and the famous and opulent court of lions. Though this golden age would be temporary, and it wouldn't be long before time came for Granada. It seemed to be like a curse, a sick joke playing on the Muslim dynasties residing in the Iberian Peninsula. It's just like clockwork. They couldn't stop infighting. If they stopped, they probably would have prospered. But, as I said before, infighting, rivalries, and disputes over succession caused instability in Granada, which would be exploited by Castile and Portugal. Many cities and territories were captured as a result of this, though they remained in a tentative peace with Castile for a while, as Castile was going through its own civil wars and crises. However, the foreign policy of Castile towards Granada was clear: war and annexation, no matter the cost. Isabella I came to the throne of Castile in 1474, as he married Ferdinand II of Aragon. They both decided to conquer Granada, and this would be put in a personal union between these two Iberian Christian kingdoms. The emirate used to survive by playing both of these sides, pitting them against each other, though this was no longer possible. This was now a game of survival. Civil wars still plagued the emirate, and Muhammad X, Muhammad XI, let it be clear that most of the dynasts in this Nasrid Emirate were all almost named Muhammad. So there's a lot of them. And the only reason there was a lot of them was because of political infighting. Note that Muhammad V of the Granada Sultanate, his rule it was not that far from Muhammad XI's, the Muhammad IX. You see how confusing it is? It's just almost referred to the Abbasid Caliphate, which had a lot of rulers and was merely a puppet, though the Granadans would fight for another 10 years. However, bitter infighting weakened them. Similar case with the Byzantine Empire, where political and dynastic infighting would cause their end. In 1492, January 2nd, Muhammad surrendered Granada to Castile and thus ended centuries of Muslim rule in Iberia, completing the long process of the Reconquista. Some remained in Iberia, while others fled to the North Africa and the Ottoman Empire in the east. Muhammad IX lived until 1533 or 1513, sources disagree, and his sons lived in poverty. They themselves died, and the Nasrid dynasty soon ended. It should be noted that before the Reconquista even occurred, it seemed that Muslim control over Iberia was absolute. Even West Francia, which would go on to become France, didn't have the power to stop them. But we have to admire the Taifas and their dedication, especially the Emirate of Granada, which was surrounded by only Christian polities who wanted nothing more but their destruction and conquest. The mark they left, however, still lingers, both in Spanish culture and architecture, as I said before, the Alhambra fortress, or the lions. It should be noted too that one of the conquerors of these cities, Alfonso the 10th or 11th or the 9th, it's a lot of Alfonsos, he conquered Toledo and made it his capital, which was a former Muslim city. That will do for this video. If you liked it, make sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell for no more notifications, and thank you for watching. See you all next time. Perhaps the next topic of the video may be not centered in Europe. It may be centered in somewhere else. We'll see, however. Until then, everybody. Good night.